A genetic collapse so massive, it wiped out nearly every male lineage on Earth. Only 1 out of every 17 men on Earth survived. In 2015, a landmark study published in Genome Research revealed something truly shocking: the Neolithic Y-chromosome bottleneck, the death of 3.94 million soldiers. Two civilizations, thousands of miles apart, speaking two completely different languages, and yet recording the same consequences. DNA collapse, the archaeological scars, the war text, all point to one thing. Something massive happened around 5,000 to 7,000 years ago. But here's the real challenge. Can we date it? Not with guesses or legends, but with data. In 2015, a landmark study published in Genome Research revealed something truly shocking: a massive collapse in global male genetic diversity. Not just in one region, but across nearly every continent. This event is known as the Neolithic Y-chromosome bottleneck. Here's what that means. The Y chromosome, passed down from father to son, suddenly showed a genetic bottleneck, as if nearly all male bloodline had been wiped out in a single window of time. Meanwhile, the mitochondrial DNA passed from mother stayed stable. That tells scientists one crucial thing: the women survived. The population didn't shrink, only the lineage of fathers collapsed. Something or someone was selecting which man got to survive and which ones didn't. What kind of event could wipe out 90% of men while leaving most women untouched? Let's put this in modern times. Imagine a scenario where suddenly only 1 out of every 17 men on Earth survives. 8 billion people today. About 4 billion are men. A collapse like that would leave about 235 million men on the planet, fewer than the population of Indonesia. This isn't purely theoretical. During World War I, countries like France, Germany, and UK lost up to 1 in 4 adult men in just 4 years. In the World War II, entire male generations in Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union were nearly wiped out. But here's the difference. We have records of those wars. For this one, no written accounts, no declared battles, just a genetic scar buried in our cells. So what could have caused it? What kind of war was big enough to erase the fathers of humanity and leave almost nothing behind? Maybe the answer isn't in the fossils. Maybe it's in the stories. Some of the most vivid war accounts ever written don't come from modern field reports or declassified military archives. They come from an ancient Indian epic known as the Mahabharata, a text over 200,000 verses, making it the longest surviving epic in human history. For perspective, the Bible has around 31,000 verses. The Iliad and Odyssey combined just under 27,000 lines. The Mahabharata is over 5 times longer. And within the vast body, more than 25,000 verses are focused on one event alone: the Kurukshetra War. That's not a myth. That's military documentation in poetic form. Day by day battle records, formations, casualties, tactical decisions, psychological breakdowns. It reads less like a fantasy and more like a civilizational postmortem. To call it mythology is to miss its scale. To call it scripture is to ignore its precision. This is, at its core, a logbook of societal collapse, preserved not through ruins, but through memory. A battle so large, so calculative, and so destructive that it doesn't feel like fiction. It feels like someone was documenting the collapse of a world. The war lasted just 18 days, but within that time, it described the death of 3.94 million soldiers, a figure derived from the breakdown of 18 Akshvanis, specific military divisions defined by infantry, cavalry, chariots, and elephants. This isn't poetic exaggeration. The Mahabharata literally gives us the numbers, the formations, and even the daily progression of the war. Each day of the war is documented with named generals, tactics, strategic formations, and even psychological breakdown of the warriors. These are not dreamlike metaphors. These are war logs. And that's why this text matters. Because it doesn't just talk about scale. It talks about weapons that erase terrain, vaporize armies, and target armies at the level of consciousness. The Brahmastra, for example, is described as a weapon that once unleashed could not be recalled. It emitted unbearable heat, blinding light, and caused stillbirths, barren lands, poison winds, and water that became undrinkable for years. Symptoms that resemble modern radiation fallout. In one passage, the land is described as covered in ash, where nothing would grow for decades. Another verse warns of a wind that burned the sky and turned the warrior nails and hairs white. This isn't mythical language. This is a survivor's report. Other weapons, like the Narayanastra and Pushpastra, are said to be programmable, targeting only armed opponents or attacking through the 5 elements: earth, air, fire, water, and ether. These aren't bronze spears and wooden shields. These are descriptions of precision targeted, high energy weapons, possibly passed down as memory, masked in mythic language. And when the war ends, it's not just one side that wins. It's almost every dynasty that's erased. Out of millions, only one successor, Parikshit, survives. And even he had to be saved from a womb attack using divine intervention. A new era begins. A new yuga starts. The war isn't just the end of the story. It's the end of a genetic chapter in human history. If a war of this scale truly happened, there should be scars, not just stories. In 1922, an Indian archaeologist named R.D. Banerjee, working under British Sir John Marshall of Archaeological Survey of India, unearthed the ruins of a vast unknown city in present-day Pakistan. It would later be called Mohenjo-daro, one of the largest cities of the ancient Indus Valley civilization. What they found was astonishing. Planned grid-like streets, multi-story homes, advanced drainage systems that rival some modern cities. But what ended it was a mystery. There was no sign of invasion, no flood sediments, no epidemic graves, and yet the city was abandoned, suddenly and without rebuilding. During early excavations, 33 skeletons were found lying in the streets, many face down, some hand in hand, as if something struck them all at once. No visible wounds, no weapons, no signs of struggle. In the 1970s, researchers like David Davenport, in collaboration with Italian scientist Ettore Vincenti, claimed to find evidence of vitrification. Areas where stones and clay had melted and fused into glass, consistent with heat exposure above 1,500 degrees Celsius. Their reports documented a specific area with what they called a focal blast zone, where a layer of focused clay and greenish glass had formed, but without any natural explanation like volcanic activity. And Mohenjo-daro isn't an isolated case. Similar heat-melted structures have been found across the world. In Scotland, over 70 vitrified forts. The stone walls melted from within. Silusastani in Peru, where ancient burial towers show signs of localized stone fusion. Bebine Lake, British Columbia, and Alba Longo in Italy, both containing glassy, scorched ruins without volcanic origins. These aren't just mysteries of architecture. These are the signs that massive, sudden heat, beyond anything fire or metallurgy could explain, was unleashed in multiple places across the world. And what's strange? That many of these sites date roughly to the same period, 5000 to 3000 BCE, the same window in which the Y-chromosome bottleneck occurred. So you have a genetic collapse in the record, an ancient war text describing womb-targeted destruction, and physical evidence of cities struck by intense heat, suddenly abandoned. These may not be disconnected stories. They may be the archaeological, genetic, and literary echoes of a forgotten global event. While ancient India was preserving the memory of a civilization-ending war in verse, another part of the world was etching its stories into stone. In ancient Sumer, one of the world's oldest known civilizations, located in present-day Iraq, scribes used cuneiform scripts on clay tablets to record their history. What these tablets describe is astonishing. In the texts like the Enuma Elish and the Arthur's epic, they speak of powerful beings called the Anunnaki, divine rulers or sky gods who governed over humans, resources, and the planet itself. In texts like the Enuma Elish and the Arthur's epic, we find description of intense conflict, not between kings or tribes, but between factions of the gods themselves. The chief figures are Enlil and Enki. Enlil is described as a strict, controlling leader who wants to eliminate humanity. Enki, his brother, is the protector of humans, the one who walked among men and tried to preserve life. Their rivalry leads to a celestial war, with accounts of cities scorched by fire from the skies, winds poisoned, and humans genetically re-engineered for control. One translation of the Lament of Ur reads, "The storm left the city in ruins. Houses were flattened. Blood filled the wells. The people vanished like smoke." This isn't abstract. It's post-battle description. Other tablets refer to flying machines, described as moving between the heavens and the earth, and weapons capable of turning cities to ash. Some translations describe the use of great weapon that caused blindness, sickness, and skin burns, all symptoms we now associate with radiation exposure. The tablets preserved in the British Museum, Louvre, and Istanbul, and digitized in ETCSL are not just fictional poetry. Now pause, because this language doesn't just echo that of Sumer's neighbors. It mirrors almost perfectly the descriptions of the Brahmastra's aftermath from the Mahabharata: blinding light, poisoned air, burnt earth, stillborn children, two civilizations, thousands of miles apart, speaking two completely different languages, and yet recording the same consequences. Either they were both writing the same fiction, or they were writing from experience. Different perspectives, same war. Up to this point, everything that we have seen, the DNA collapse, the archaeological scars, the war text, all point to one thing. Something massive happened around 5,000 to 7,000 years ago. But here's the real challenge. Can we date it? Not with guesses or legends, but with data. One Indian researcher, Nilesh Oak, attempted exactly that. Instead of relying on archaeological layers or linguistic guesses, he turned to the sky. The Mahabharata isn't just poetry. It's filled with astronomical references, eclipses, planetary conjunctions, lunar phases, star positions during the key events. Nilesh Oak inputs over 215 unique sky observations from the Mahabharata into modern astronomical software, including planetary longitudes, nakshatras, constellations, eclipse data, and lunar phases. According to Nilesh Oak's model, there's only one time in the last 10,000 years when the sky matches all the astronomical events described in the Mahabharata. And that's 5561 BCE. More precisely, the Mahabharat war should have started on October 16, 5561 BCE, based on exact planetary positions. So what kind of data are we talking about? Well, here's the breakdown. In modern terms, Saturn was positioned near the bright red star, Aldebaran, parts of the Taurus constellation. The Mahabharata says that this position was inauspicious, and modern astronomy confirms that it occurred in that year. Second, Mars was retrograde in Jeshta. That means Mars appeared to move backward in the night sky, near the star Antares in the Scorpius constellation. This rare retrograde motion matches the wartime omen described by Vyas in the Mahabharata. Third, Jupiter-Moon conjunction in Revathi. Jupiter and the Moon were in the same part of the sky, near the star Zeta Piscium in the Pisces constellation, exactly where the text says they were during key events leading up to the battle. Fourth, 2 eclipses within 13 days. This is one of the Mahabharat's most dramatic warnings. 2 eclipses, a solar and a lunar, within a 2-week span. Astronomical simulations confirm in 5561 BCE this eclipse pairing did happen, and it's a rare event. Number 5. Venus in Purva Bhadrapada. Venus appeared near a star group now linked with the Pegasus constellation, and this alignment was mentioned by Bhishma on his deathbed as he tracked the sky waiting for the winter solstice to pass. These aren't poetic metaphors. These are sky coordinates, data points. And when plotted using modern astronomy softwares like Stellarium or NASA's JPL, these alignments only occur together once in over 10,000 years. And the date, October 5561 BC. That's not a coincidence. That's a timestamp embedded in an epic. There's something ancient India did that no other civilization even attempted. It didn't just watch the sky. It recorded history through it. While most ancient cultures mark time by kings or dynasties, Indian texts like the Mahabharata and Ramayana marked it using planetary alignments and celestial events. It's as if the sky itself was used as a ledger, a living archive that couldn't be altered, rewritten, or destroyed. And here's the stunning part. These details were not stored in scientific manuals or star charts. They were woven in epic, passed through generations as stories, accessible to anyone, yet decodable by those who knew how to read the stars. This isn't religious. This isn't symbolic. It's astronomical encoding of historical memories. Other civilizations told you what happened, but here, India told you when. Not just with lores, but with sky-locked precision. So now, we have looked at the genome. We have looked at the war. We have looked at the Earth. Now it's time to ask the question, does any of this actually lines up, or are we just chasing shadows? According to most estimates, the global population around 5000 to 3000 BCE was roughly 5 to 20 million people. Let's take a conservative midpoint, around 10 million. Now, the Mahabharata describes a war involving 3.94 million soldiers, all men. That's almost 40% of the global male population at that time, if not more. And remember, these are just the warriors, not counting the support staff, civilians, and the dynasties they belong to. Suddenly, the Y-chromosome collapse doesn't sound far-fetched. It sounds mathematically aligned. A war that wipes out every dynasty, every male heir, every royal lineage, leaving only one successor. That's not symbolic. That's a genetic reset. The 2015 genome study that revealed the male line bottleneck wasn't based on a narrow sample. It analyzed DNA for over 120 populations across 6 continents, including Africa, Europe, Central Asia, East Asia, and the Americas. The result, the collapse wasn't regional. It was global. And that matches exactly what the Mahabharata hints at. A conflict that wasn't contained to Bharat alone, but extended across the known world. The epic mentions names like Yavana, Kamboj, China, and Shakas, tribes later associated with regions as far as Greece, Central Asia, and China. Now, these were not dynasties that participated in the war itself. Most scholars agree that these names were later editorial substitutions, used to describe regions that would be familiar to audience centuries later. They weren't acronyms, they were directional markers. And they align with the same geographic arc where the genetic collapse occurred. Coincidence or encoded memory of a war that spread farther than we have ever imagined? Some Indian texts even describe warriors emerging from Patal, not a mythic underworld, but possibly a reference to the land on the opposite side of the earth. Draw a line straight through the earth from India and you arrive in Mesoamerica. So here's what we are left with. A datable war 5561 BCE. A massive male extinction event proven through DNA. A global spread of ruins and scorched earth. These weren't tribal records. They were global echoes, preserved long before we even called it a globe. This isn't mythology. This is multi-disciplinary evidence of a forgotten global event. But here's where it gets deeper. You might ask that how were these stories with exact numbers, formations, and star positions passed down so accurately before paper, before scripts, and before satellites? The answer may lie not in ruins, but in the human brain itself. Studies on collective memory and cultural transmission show that societies encode trauma through narrative repetition, rituals, poetry, and symbols. This is how oral culture preserved information across thousands of years. Think about it. What if the Mahabharata wasn't just a tale, but a trauma map, recited generation after generation? Because the mind refuses to forget what the earth itself never healed from. What if Sumerian tablets weren't myths, but etched therapy, trying to process what had happened? Maybe that's why the details remain. The sky positions, the names, the burning wind, because some part of humanity refused to let the memory die. I didn't set out to prove a theory. I set out to follow the data wherever it led. And what I found wasn't mythological. It wasn't speculation. It was a pattern, a story that keeps repeating across disciplines, continents, and languages, like a drumbeat buried just below the surface of history. I'm not here to convince you. I'm here to show you what's being ignored. Because sometimes truth doesn't shout. It whispers through stone, through silence, through scars in the genome, and stories written in the stars. If ancient civilizations encoded what they lived through, not just in temples or tablets, but in memory itself, then maybe our job today is not to dismiss those records, but to finally listen. If you felt that this story challenged what we think we know, share it, comment your thoughts, and subscribe, not just for theories, but for truths hidden in plain sight. This is it from my side. This is Harry signing off. Stay curious.